What's going on, guys? It's late at night, so there's no one here yet. Just give them a minute to pop in, but that title tonight is pretty lofty and ridiculous, but it's actually true. I can deliver on it. I am going to share with you the secrets of manifestation, the truth about it anyways. Don't get too excited. And a lot of other deeply important stuff. So last night I did a stream where I featured some of Michael Levin's academic video, one of them actually. Teleology makes no sense, or biology makes no sense without teleology. And I've seen it before, but it didn't really hit me the way it hit me last night. There are so many levels of that, it's hard to figure out where to start. But let's start with the consequence for me. Really understanding that my sort of ontological model that I was born with, the way I've always seen the universe, I wasn't just thinking stuff. It is how it is. And that understanding and openness, I guess, allowed me to interact with the world in a lot of really remarkable ways. And that perspective that I had is something that is ridiculed, in our mainstream society. So, even though I had seen the results, and I have been very careful about objectivity, right? Like, after experiencing so many improbable things, years later, I contacted people that were witnesses, and without leading them, I'd say, remember when we went to LA because I wanted to talk to a certain person? Do you remember what happened? Can you tell me every detail, So I've gone through taken a lot of measures, to make sure that I checked myself along the way, and I still was carrying a lot of doubt, But after seeing and understanding finally what Levin is communicating, there's no doubt left. So let me see if I can do this justice in terms of explaining the technicalities without, I almost want to pull up his videos again because that would really help. But the basic idea is that a cell, and you can use the correlation of a person as a cell within a culture, right? Like all these systems, all those rules and mechanisms apply to all systems at all scales, right? That's part of the point of all this. He calls them light cones. And so when you have a group of cells, they have a goal state. Right? They're trying to do something. And as long as all of the constituents are working towards that goal, they will find themselves supported by their environment. When they deviate from that goal, there are something like punishments that occur, unpleasant things, inconvenient things that are, the motivation is to get this thing back in line so that it's working towards this collective goal, right? And there is an intelligence involved that is not part of the cells. And one of the best examples of this is his xenobots. They are dead skin cells from frogs that have somehow been animated. And once they are alive, so to speak, quote unquote, they can solve mazes, and they go around corners without bumping into the walls, with no eyes, no sonar, no nothing. And they even will stop and think and then choose to go the other way, right? They have agency. These things have agency. So bearing in mind that there is no genetic history for these things, Not only that, more importantly, there's not even any field information are informing cells, and he's proven that in a lot of different ways. The morphology of a fucking tadpole is everywhere in the universe all at once. It's not in the tadpole, it's in the field, which proves holography in the universe too. But let's not get too far off subject. The xenobots have no history in the field either. So these things start creating more xenobots on their own by scooping piles of cells together and then polishing them up, and then they come to life and start doing shit, I guess. So the bullet point here, though, is that they not only don't have neurons, they don't have a history anywhere. So these novel behaviors are literally coming out of where? Nowhere. And what it's proof of is that this field that dictates to systems what they should do and how they should do it is an active intelligence. It's not just a bunch of patterns. They're not just patterns in media. There is an active intelligence that is engaged in this process of creation. And none of this is conjecture at this point. Things like telepathy are obviously plausible. I've experienced it unquestionably, where we're talking about a long train of thought with exact words repeated by somebody that was a mile away. Everything I did, everything I thought, she knew every detail. And I've had plenty of other experiences like that, but I'm certain of it. So I guess the fundamental thing that I'm trying to get across, I mean, it's difficult because there's so many bits and pieces that could be presented as evidence, you know. But to get to the point, you know, I promised the secrets of life, the universe, and everything, and this is the most important one, really. This is the key, you know. I have basically built this channel around a singular message, and that message can be summarized as, you know, find your purpose, your individual self, come into alignment with that, and then you'll generally see, unless you are like a left-hand path, you know, black brother or whatever, that purpose puts you in alignment with a greater purpose, a collective purpose. And when you do that, you find yourself assisted in all kinds of remarkable ways. Your intuition seems to be, you know, incredibly accurate. I mean, I did ridiculous things. I would plan them and then see if I could just do them through intuition. And when they happened, I just couldn't believe it because they were ridiculous. You know, I'd come up with the most ridiculous thing that was actually possible and then pursue it. And then it would happen, you know. And just as if a cell gets out of line in one of these systems, the Eliphas Levi basically described all of this shit the same way that Levi did 150 years ago. You know, the forces that you have set in motion will recoil upon you. Just like when a cell gets out of line and the system fucking does stuff to try to make it go back. You know? So this is not only a gateway to living for your passion, living for your dreams. This is proof of engineered dissonance in human society. Because it's not the natural inclination for a collective system that shares a goal state to become completely self-centered, for one thing. And what my life experience and what Dr. Levin is showing us shows me, I know this to be certain. When you align yourself with the collective's goal state, it's best for you as an individual as well. Like, you will go further, faster, experience more. The philosophical disposition, I guess, of humanity at this moment is so unnatural and so out of balance that it is literally like a terminal cancer. And people like me that woke up, or I didn't really wake up, I was just always awake. I was just born that way. We kind of know how the universe works and why it works, and people fucking hate us for it. He who speaks the truth has few friends, kind of thing. And this is the same thing that cells do when there's a cancer in the system, right? But the thing is, the system is the cancer. So the human race is basically fighting off its white blood cells in order to maintain a status quo in which they are the victims. Ain't that some shit? So you're not really manifesting anything. That's not really what that is. I mean, it sort of is. You could kind of think about it that way, but the way that it's sold is not it. What it really is that if you're actually in alignment and fully awake, you have no dissonance, no interference pattern between you and the magnetic attractor in hyperspace. And by the way, what I think that is, time isn't exactly an illusion. Obviously it's real enough, because here we sit, doomed to repetition. With it we mark time, right? It's real enough, but also on some level it isn't. And on that level, the universe has reached its goal state. The goal state is perfection. That's the target. And so when you align yourself with perfection of self as your goal state, then you are in the flow of the universe's algorithmic fucking entrainment, algorithm and entrainment, both the cycles, and the pull of the universe moving towards perfection. That's what you get caught up in. So the path to your highest fulfillment of your life possible is really that simple. It's just a matter of neutralizing dissonance and interference and the fears, traumas. I was not able to do that. I had this ability before I had fixed my self-sabotage and whatnot. But the God's honest truth is, I decided I wanted to play with the surviving members of the Grateful Dead. And I went out to California, and I had a plan, and Bob Weir came down to the music store after hearing a recording of me. I played for one person that knew him, and a voice in my head told me that's how it would happen, right? I didn't show up. I just didn't show up because of all that damage. But it did happen. I just didn't show up. The situation was there. It's ridiculous. There's no fucking way that rationally that should ever happen. rationally, I was thinking I would have to tour and like build a following and, you know, do all this shit and not just go sign up for lessons with a guy that happened to work with him. I had no idea, you know? So, and that's not the only story I have like that. I did all kinds of ridiculous shit like that. That I, you know, one time I was watching a George Clinton like rant, and I said to my girlfriend, "Man, I wish I could talk to him." And I pulled my weed out of my pocket. A guy behind the fence saw it and smelled it because it was, you know, I wasn't that far away from him, and it was an incredible train wreck. And he's like, "Hey, you, come here. Take that up to George's room and give him a little bit." I mean, I literally said I wanted to talk to him. I was yanked out of the audience and sent straight to his dressing room. You know, you guys, most of you probably know the Danny Carey story. I wanted to talk to him. I drove my car right to him. You know, arrived in L.A. from 1,500 miles away, like 10 minutes before he did at this like shitty club in the ghetto where he was playing at an open mic. Like, didn't make any fucking sense, but that's what happened. You know, so I know for a fact that when you align yourself with these attractors, it's not that the rules of reality bend. They don't have to. But your effort, your alignment with this trajectory that leads to perfection is swept up in the current of the universe's journey back into the light. Básicamente. So there it is. That's really the truth, the secret of life, the meaning of life is really just the experience. You know, it's either nothingness or duality with all of the shit that entails. That's the devil's bargain. You know, you follow the light bearer, the electromagnetic wave, down into matter, where there's equal parts suffering and joy? Or do you just have no experience at all in eternity as nothingness? Those are the options. You know, and when you look at the scale of our situation, which is something I did earlier today, black holes, I was watching a video with my son about black holes, and I'd never really thought about the scale of these fucking things. You know, there's a star that you can fit like, I think it's 34 quadrillion Earths in this thing, and it's not even the biggest one. You know, it like there are black holes that are like 200 million light years across. And the fucking thing is spinning at 90% the speed of light. What the actual fuck? And then they're telling us that we might actually be in a black hole. It has something to do with the fact that the universe is expanding faster than light. It's like a black hole can suck in light because there's some expansion happening that is congruent with that force, right? When you think about the scale, it can really feel bleak and give you like an existential crisis kind of thing, you know. How can there be any purpose and meaning, or, you know, like, how could there be a God? You know, look how fucking big and ridiculous this is, you know. But another way to look at it is that the level of possibilities that are available to consciousness, even as the universe is in this moment, is practically inexhaustible. And as far as I can tell, we are basically electromagnetic points places of density in a field that is this cosmic intelligence. And when we die, we'll just be used as an avatar, again, somewhere else or in the same place, or, who knows. But the journey is pretty much infinite. And so knowing this and understanding that the universe is not actually hostile and impersonal. It's not that it's entirely benevolent either. But it is constructed in such a way that if you're benevolent, it has mechanisms built into the fabric of it not only to assist you, but potentially to put you in the most perfect circumstances for your particular being that are conceivable given the circumstances dictated by natural law. That's what the fuck it's doing. When they say that the universe is all like increasing entropy, that's just looking at like the bare mechanistic gears. What about all the order and symmetry? It's emerging in equal parts. Nothing succeeds without a purpose. The universe could not exist without a purpose. And that leads us to yet another interesting question. If there is a goal state for the universe, say it's perfection, why? What is that? What is it going to be used for? Because there's a reason for it. It's not just doing it, it is doing it because nothing is the alternative, I guess. But you know what I mean? Then, and once it's in the process, there is a point to everything. The law of necessity is 100% as real as gravity. So, this top-down information interface, the goal is what is informing, driving our behavior. That also suggests that the goal already exists in, should we call it hyperspace? A little nod to Terence McKenna. But we're getting theoretical now. Not really. I don't think so. I think once you have this sort of initiated logic, you can pretty much figure out, the wiring under the board with a pretty high degree of certainty. Aleister Crowley actually was trying to tell people this, all of it. He knew all of it. And at first I was thinking when I realized this that he was older, so he was still trapped in the, archaic aesthetic, like demons and Satan and, the horror of Babylon and all this kind of shit. But if you really actually pay attention and read between the lines, he would say things like demons and spirits are not real in the way that the IRS is real. Do as thou wilt should be the whole of the law. Love is the law, love under will. Right? And if you align yourself with that sense of purpose, then, he was saying what Levin is saying. But he actually just used those theatrical trappings for publicity. That's all it was. And I should say on that note that, I'm not really sure what to think about spirits and angels and demons like that. I don't really believe in them, honestly, particularly demons, because if you're an energetic being, there's no necessity to feed off of human fear or anything. You can transmute any energy into any other type of energy. It just doesn't make any sense. Why would they even have a concept of hurt, or, you know what I mean? There's no, what for? But having said all that, I have had intuitions that come in the form of a voice. And sometimes it was female, and sometimes it was male, and they had the same personality all the time. And they kind of abandoned me to a large extent when I abandoned my mission. So I don't know that those aren't just a mechanism for the subconscious to communicate with our conscious mind. It doesn't mean that they're objectively real. But that's still an open question in my world. Why was so much of it dictated to me like that, And I often have an experience of transconscious knowledge or information reception, downloads people call it, that I'm thinking about something and it's like something interrupts and tells me something that turns out years later to be true. And I've never really decided what to think of that. It doesn't mean it's not part of the brain, but it is strange that this voice will pop into my head and say something to me I don't even understand. And in every case, it's turned out to be verified by, physicists or whatever later, at least intimated to be true. One case, I was thinking about light and black holes or something, and I had the thought, nothing is faster than light, and this voice in my head was like, consciousness is faster than light. And I was like, what the fuck? I knew it was true, but I didn't know what it meant. And now there's a theory that consciousness is generated through entanglement, entangled by photon pairs and other such quantum phenomena. So entanglement is instant. That's what that voice meant, and I certainly didn't know about entanglement so, you know what I mean? It's an interesting thing. Then again, back to Levin's work, we have proof now that the information that directs the behavior of systems is coming from the goal and not from the components of the system. So we have access to information that is relevant to our goal state. It's not like you can just know anything. And I've also wondered why it trickles in the way it does, But I've proven that too. Not many people have seen it, but the Calabi-Yau manifold, Euler equation, all that stuff that I put together a while back, and then I found the Langlands program published it. That's real. There's the AI calculated between 1 in a trillion and 1 in 26 septillion for the odds that I could have guessed it all. And there was no guessing. And it's not something that we should put people up on pedestals about either. That's one of the reasons that I've been so hesitant to talk about it explicitly like that, because you don't want to come off that way, and we have this hierarchical kind of perception of spiritual entities that we have that has been inculcated into us through the Judeo-Christian influence. there's this idea that if God, you're supposed to, grovel and serve and all that. If there is a person that is connected to that, what we call divine consciousness, then I guess it just makes sense to people that they should do the same with them. And it's not true. It's going to be normal here directly. This is not really anything exceptional. It's just that we have been immersed in a society where it has been suppressed. The crazy thing is, at the end of the day, in a sense, parapsychological phenomena are nothing but biology. It's just part of being a biological entity. And it's an interesting position to be in too, because realizing I've just known all this stuff my whole life. I wonder what else I know that I don't know, or what else is coming. And it's funny because I have no idea really. I can't really just think about it. It's like the goal state. When it needs to send information, it does. And part of my issue in the last few years is that I have decreased my relevance to that goal state by abandoning the music and leaving California. So I don't have the necessity to access things the way that I did before, but I still get what I need for my purposes, as a YouTuber, I guess. And by the way, while we're on the subject, I'm definitely trying to shift my focus back and see if it's not too late to realign. And I don't see any reason why it would be, because for one thing, Levin has also proven that mind over matter is much more effective. In fact, he has gone so far to say that everything is a placebo. All of it. And he has also proven that cells have the ability, like planarian worms, they can be put in a polluted petri dish with potassium, their heads blow up. But then without even dying, this isn't over the course of several generations. This is in the course of one organism, its head explodes, and it grows another one, but in the meantime, it changes its own DNA so that it is immune to the potassium in the water. Changes its own. Wait, so you're telling me a planarian worm knows how to operate DNA? No, it doesn't. No, it doesn't. But there is something else that does. This explains a lot of morphological adaptations we've been seeing that are context aware. Time. They're aware of temporal parameters. And they're mutating species relative to those parameters, informed by them. And that's what's up. Oh no. Are you kidding me, man? Son of a bitch. Not that the rules of reality bend. The most perfect circumstances aren't just a mechanism for the subconscious